What's up, my dudes? Today I will be reviewing Batman Arkham Asylum, series placed on Series Earth by Grant Morrison and illustrated by Dave McKean. So let's get started. First thing I want to talk about is the art. And oh my god, I loved it. Freaking loved the art. I loved it so much. Just I love it so much because it's just so unique and interesting and just so out there, and like Dave McKean did such a great job. I love it. I love his work so much in this comic that I am definitely going to find other comics that he's done or just anything that he's illustrated, because oh my god, his artwork's so beautiful and just so cool. Like, there's just no way to describe it. If I had to describe it to give you guys an idea, I guess it's like Picasso mixed with Tim Burton. At least that's how I describe the look of this comic. He has such a, like, in his normal artworks, it's just, just so unique to his style that you can't compare it to anything else. So I'd highly suggest you guys look up Dave McKean, look at some of his art, cause wow, I love it so much. In this comic specifically, he has, like, it has a very chaotic feel to it, which is very good, cause it really matches with the vibe of the comic, since the comic is about Arkham Asylum, the most insane place on Earth. It does very, like, the chaotic vibe of his art does a really good job matching with it. His art is also really scary. Like, once you read this comic and you read the first few pages, you'll know what I mean. It's really scary, like, and just really creepy too. His backgrounds, I love his backgrounds because it just has, like, at least in this comic, it has a very chaotic feel. I know I said that already a bunch of times, but, like, for example, so in the comic, when the Joker, there's this one scene where the Joker, like, opens up the doors to Arkham Asylum to show Batman, and oh my god, it's my favorite scene in a comic book ever, like, of all time. And it's brilliant because it's just like there's just a bunch of text everywhere, and like just random things people are saying, and there's a lot of just clocks, statues, sort of random things everywhere, and it just really captures the feel of Arkham Asylum really well, I think. Let's talk about the character designs. Now, I realized from my last review that I should not talk about every single character design because that can get boring and very lengthy. So I'm only going to discuss the characters that were that stood out to me personally. So first off, of course, the Joker. He's the main star of this comic, and I really love the design of the Joker because he's a very, like, cartoonish looking Joker, and a very scary one too, because he's got, like, big long chin, bulging eyes, big grin and smile, and he's just very scary. And a lot of the panels with him in it are, like, washed out, so you really just see just a bunch of white and, like, his eyes and a big smile. Yeah, very saturated and washed out. It's like the Jeff the Killer creepypasta picture, basically. That's what a lot of it looks like. I also love that, so he has a very full head of hair, but the hair is, like, very wispy and, like, flowy. Like, it's as if his hair has its own wind causing it to move. And I also love that, like, throughout the comic, his hair sort of changes length. Sometimes it's really long, sometimes it's short. and the inconsistency of his hair really gives that feel of like a dream like state, which is what Grant Morrison and Dave McKean, I believe, were going for, was this to all feel like some sort of weird, scary dream. And also, this is another thing, each character has their own sort of text style. So for example, a lot of the normal characters, they have, the standard text style of just black on white. However, so for Batman, he has a white on black text style, which is really cool. And the Joker, his text style is like, he has no bubble, and it's just like red etching sort of thing. Like, it looks like something a crazy person would carve into a wall, and it also looks like sort of like blood too. It's really cool. I love it so much because it really gives you an idea of like what the character sounds like and sort of like the personality of the character, as opposed to having just a black on white text bubble. So I really loved that they had each character had their own personalized text. So Batman, I liked his design. You never really get to see a close-up of him or really a detailed look at his costume. It's just mostly like, he mostly looks like a black shadow in a lot of the panels. However, I really liked you can see his shoulders are like curved and pointed into a sort of little spiral type thing, which really gave a Tim Burton feel to his character. But I love the idea of just making him sort of like a shadow, and like you never really, like when you see him, you don't see a detailed version of him, because it really shows like how it feels like he's trying to hide from people, which I think is what the vibe which was I think the vibe that they're going for, because Grant Morrison has said he wanted a Batman that was very closed off and afraid of intimacy and like people. So I think the way they portrayed him in the art style really gave off that sort of vibe. Two-Face, I really love Two-Face's design, and that's because there are 3 categories of character designs of Two-Face that I like to think of. And this is just character designs. This isn't like his personality or anything. This isn't like the 3 types of Jokers. This is just character design. And so the first one is the Two-Face, where he's half of his face is like a monster. And you can see this in the 90s animated Batman series, and as well as the live action movie with Jim Carrey as the Riddler. He has like a half monster looking face, and this is more used in a lot of other cartoons, and it's more of a cartoonish version of Two-Face. The second type of Two-Face that you see a lot is the half burnt face Two-Face, and this is used for a more realistic version of Two-Face. Examples are Two-Face in the Arkham Batman video game series, and as well as the Telltale series version of Two-Face, and Azarella's Joker version of Two-Face. They all have half of a burnt face, and I think this one's the most common. So you see this type of Two-Face a lot. Third type of Two-Face that I really like is the one where half of his face is like plants, and like it looks like fungus is coming out of half of his face. And you never really see this type of Two-Face. It's very rare. Like, the only examples I can think of is this comic, Arkham Asylum, and there's this fan art of like vintage versions of Batman that I found that really, I don't know who the artist is, but it's an example of where half of his face looks like plants. And I really love that type of Two-Face because I think it looks so cool. And so that's why I really like the Two-Face in this comic, because he was that Two-Face where half of his face was more like a plant fungus type thing. The last character design that I want to talk about is Clayface, and that's because usually when you see Clayface, he looks like a big mud man, right? Like he's made out of clay and he's like a big monster type of thing. However, in this comic, they made him this very tiny green goblin looking person because he's really diseased filled and like very sick, and he tries to infect Batman. And I really liked this take on Clayface. I'm not sure exactly why he's so sickly and whatnot. Like, I don't know if this is based off of like another origin or interpretation of Clayface. So if you guys know of any other sort of sickly infectious disease Clayfaces, or as to why they went with this sort of sickly Clayface, then please comment down below to tell me. But yeah, I just really liked this type of Clayface. Time to talk about the story. Now I'll give a quick summary. This will be a spoiler-free summary. So, the inmates of Arkham have taken over Gotham Asylum, namely the Joker. They end up leading Batman into the asylum, and once he's there, they have him play a game of hide and seek for his life. While all this is happening, you learn the history of Arkham Asylum and the man who founded Arkham Asylum, Amadeus Arkham. I don't know if that's how you pronounce his name, but if this summary sounds familiar, that's because this is the comic book that inspired the Batman Arkham Asylum video game, which is pretty acclaimed and all that. I unfortunately have not gotten to play Arkham Asylum yet. However, I plan to in the future because of this comic. There were a lot of complaints about the comic that it didn't have enough action, and that like one person, I forget who, described it as like it felt like Batman was just going through this haunted house and that there was really no high stakes or anything. However, I really enjoyed the fact that there wasn't a lot of like action or anything, because it gave it like a really leisurely feel, that we were just sort of going through this building and we were focusing more on the characters themselves than some sort of story or like high risk stakes or anything. I also really enjoyed getting these looks into the characters' brains, because I personally am a fan of like taking a look at the character's psyche rather than like having, especially with superheroes, like I prefer looking at their psyche than just seeing them fight people all the time, especially with Batman, because like I'm very interested in like mental illness and whatnot. Of course, this book and a lot of the Batman universe is not a great representation of mental illness because everyone's a murderer, but still I really enjoy taking a look at these characters' the mental side of them rather than the action-packed side of them. I also really enjoyed the fact that Arkham felt like a sentient being, like the building felt alive, because it felt like it was like purposely guiding Batman to where he needs to go, and also sort of like it felt like a big maze, and it felt inescapable as well, because there's so many long hallways and whatnot, and just like it feels like there's no way out, and that the building is purposely guiding Batman to his doom when he's facing all these villains and whatnot, which I thought that was really cool because it added to the vibe of like the superstition and like insanity vibe to it, because it was like, is Batman going crazy or is it just the building itself, you know, which I really enjoyed. A lot of people had complaints that there was too much symbolism in it, like that it felt like the symbolism was just all crammed in there, and that it was meant to just get as many symbolism things in there to make it feel artsy. I actually didn't get that vibe though, but that's probably because I didn't notice a lot of the things that were meant to be symbolism. Like, a lot of that stuff just went over my head, and I don't know, like, maybe that's just because I have a hard time comprehending symbolism, but also a lot of the symbolism is like religious sort of stuff, and since I'm not a religious person and I don't know much about religion, a lot of it just went wide over my head. So maybe that's why I didn't mind all the symbolism and whatnot. But I also really enjoy a lot of symbolism. I love things that have a deeper meaning to them, because even though I have a hard time looking at the deeper meaning of things, I love watching like videos and stuff of, finding a deeper meaning within a lot of TV shows and whatnot. And I just think it's so fun when you read something. It's like it has a little secret to it because of the symbolism. So I didn't mind the symbolism at all. And also the 15th anniversary version of it, which I think is like the most common copy at this point to get, they put the actual script of the comic book in at the end of the comic, and Grant Morrison has like notes on the symbolism and what it means. So if you're really all that confused and whatnot, it's nice to take a look at the comic book script, and more things will probably make more sense to you. I also like the idea of them adding in that little script for the 15th anniversary, because it's nice to see like what the author was really imagining, and like how it's nice to see the process of how these comic books are created. So I really liked that about the 15th anniversary version. So now we're going to get into spoiler territory. So if you don't want to be spoiled, then I suggest you leave this video, pick up your own copy of the book, read it, and then come back. But if you don't care about spoilers, then go ahead and keep on watching, you rebel. Like I said before, it focuses on Batman's psyche, and specifically his parents dying, of course. And but the way Grant Morrison wrote it, it's instead of like a lot of other Batman media, like his parents died and he became a crime fighter because he wants to get vengeance on like all crime people and whatnot, and he doesn't want what happened to him to happen to like other people. However, Grant Morrison goes deeper into that, and he makes it so it seems like instead of Batman wanting to help the greater good or like people, he does vigilantism. I don't know if that's a word, but he's a vigilante in order for more selfish reasons. They do explore his parents dying, like they show us his parents dying, and a lot of the reason why Batman is sad about that, besides the fact that his parents are dead, is that he feels guilty for it because he asked his parents to leave the movie theater, so they left early. And in the comic, his parents, they're actually really mean to him because they're like saying like, "Oh, you coward, you don't want to watch Bambi, like, how dare you make us leave the movie." But so they get shocked because they left the movie prematurely, and so Bruce blames himself for that. So he becomes more closed off and like doesn't want to share his emotions and is scared of intimacy, and which is actually kind of cool, because this comic nowadays in the present time seems to have held up and is actually relevant today, because people are always talking about toxic masculinity and like toxic behaviors of like not wanting to share your emotions, like people shaming people for not wanting to share their emotions and to take it and to use, like, instead of showing their emotions and their vulnerability, to like just be violent. um, and even this was even like toxic behaviors were like always a thing, but people weren't really talking about them until nowadays. So I don't think that was really, I don't know if that was Grant Morrison's intention of the book, but I do think it's really cool that, like, even though this book was made in like the 80s, it still has relevant themes nowadays. I also liked how they not only explored Batman's psyche, but also the Joker's psyche. Like, they explained that he has like a super sanity thing, and that like they'd go in more depth as to what's wrong with him, as opposed to a lot of like other comics and media where they just say like, oh, he's insane, that's why he does what he does, which is sort of like lazy writing. So I appreciate their attempt in like explaining the Joker's ways and whatnot. I also really liked that they like showed a closer relationship between Batman and Joker. Like, instead of it just being like, you know, hero versus villain, they had a more intertwined relationship that was much more complicated than that. And like, so that like by the end of the comic, the Joker sort of like rebuilt Batman and like sent him off. And so I really liked that as well. I also like, overall, they just had an in-depth new take of all the characters. Like, for example, Two-Face, they explained how in order to cure him, and they switched him from a coin to a dice. That way, instead of 2 options, he has 6 options. And then from the dice, they went to the tarot cards, which gave him like 13 or 16 options, I forget. But you know, like a lot of more options. However, they show that this backfires because once Two-Face has the tarot cards, he can't even make the simplest decisions, like going to the bathroom, because he just has so many choices. So he ends up like peeing himself a lot of the time because he takes forever to choose what choice to make. So I really liked that new take on the character, and how they showed that how dependent Two-Face is on the coin and his choices. So I really loved that new take. The last thing I want to talk about that I really loved was that I mentioned how I loved this in my last review with the Joker by Azzarello, but I loved how they, like, it wasn't just the Joker, but they had so many other characters that were involved and played big parts to this comic as well. And I even liked this more because the characters that they had were very, like, the characters that they showed in the story were very much underdog characters who like rarely ever get portrayed in comics and get the limelight. Like, for example, they have Maxie Zeus and Dr. Destiny. I didn't even know about those characters before I read this comic, so I think it's really cool for Grant Morrison to be creative and take the idea of just taking these characters who could be interesting in their own right and add them to this comic. They also had like the Mad Hatter and Clayface, which those characters get the limelight a bit more, but still not enough. And so I loved how Grant Morrison wasn't afraid to take these characters that like are rarely ever seen and like expand on them within this comic. So I loved that. Or in conclusion, I think this comic was phenomenal. I loved it so much, not only because of the art, but the story was also really great in my opinion. It's just so different from other comics that I can see why a lot of people might not like it at first, but I loved it so much, and this is definitely probably going to be in like one of my favorite comics of all time. Definitely probably in like my top 10 once I read enough comics to have like a top 10. But yeah, I just love this comic so much. I would recommend it to anyone, even if they don't like Batman. I would recommend it to them. Even if they don't like comics, I'd recommend it to them, because I just love this so much. And I definitely will look out for more Grant Morrison works, and I will definitely look for more Dave McKean comics, because oh my god, his art, just fantastic. So yeah, thanks for watching my review, and I guess I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!